You can do it. I have faith in you. Hello, everyone. How are you today? Let's talk about a few things, shall we? Let's talk about who the heck I am, what the heck I'm doing here, what I'm trying to accomplish. Not necessarily in that order. Well, first of all, I have been riding motorcycles and bicycles, mostly bicycles. Well, I've been riding bikes since I was a little kid. I got my first motorcycle when I was about 20 in San Francisco, when I first moved there. And motorcycles weren't really on my radar until I moved there and I discovered motorcycles. Because at the time, in the early 1990s, don't do the math, please don't do the math, there were UJMs everywhere. What's a UJM? A Universal Japanese Motorcycle, a 4-cylinder air-cooled transverse-mounted engine in a knockoff Norton featherbed frame. That is the kind of the definition of an UJM. And the damn things were everywhere. Honda Nighthawks, Honda Nighthawk S's, CB750s, GS850s, GS550s, KZ750s, GPZ750s. All kinds of bikes everywhere. Seemed like under every tree and under every lamppost there was a clapped out UJM in the process of either being fixed or abandoned. Sometimes both at the same time. And I was into, cars and girls and stuff. So I knew a thing or two about how engines worked and how girls worked. But the cool thing about motorcycles is that there's no artifice to them. At least something like a UJM, there's no artifice. Literally, there's nothing between you and the machine. So you can stare at the machine and kind of figure out how it works. You can figure out, okay, that's where the clutch is. That must be where the alternator is. This one has 4 cylinders because you can see 4 pipes, etc., etc. It was kind of a non-linear lesson in mechanics and engine layout. And I got so enamored, of course, that I wanted one of my own. And eventually, I got one. My first bike was a 1980 KZ550. Black one, although I think they were all black at the time for that year. And I loved it. I absolutely adored it. It was just as clapped out as any other UJM was. It needed just as much work as any UJM did. And I learned. I had to. Because I couldn't afford to take it to a shop. I had to figure out how to fix it on my own. And I learned Toot Sweet by necessity. And I probably spent about as much time working on and fixing that bike than I did riding it. I put in a new clutch levers, checked the valve clearances. What else did I do? Put on the center stand, redid the drivetrain, put on new chain and sprockets, all kinds of stuff. Of course, tons of electrical issues. Learned how to bump start the thing. It was a good lesson. It was a good bike. I loved it. And then I got bike envy. And I wanted a bigger bike. Because that's what you do. Want a bigger bike. But the main thing that I kind of was having issues with the KZ550 is that it was a great round town bike. It was an amazing bike in traffic and for splitting lanes and so on. But it wasn't great on the highway. It kind of topped out at about 60 or so, maybe 65 if you were really cranking it. And it blew around a lot. So taking it to, say, Marin across the Golden Gate Bridge was often a very cold, very windblown thing. So I bought an 1981 Suzuki GS 850 to replace my 550. And it turns out I kind of hated the thing. It was an amazing highway bike, but contrary to the KZ, it was a pig around town. And it kind of scared me. And it scared me enough that I kind of was off motorcycles for a while and back to bicycles. And I kind of got serious about bicycles. And one of the things I discovered about bicycles is that you can own more than one of them. And the only penalty you pay is the little bit of extra storage you need to store the other one. So I started out with a crappy mountain bike. I think it was a GT Outpost. But then I found a really nice second-hand Miata. I think it said it was a 210, but I don't think it was. I think it was, I don't know, maybe it was. But it was a really nice touring bike with canty brakes and triple chain rings and so on. It was a nice bike. And that kind of got me into road biking. Where was I? Oh yeah, bicycles. So then I moved back east. I originally grew up outside of Boston. I moved back east without my motorcycles, but with my bicycles. And I got super into bikes and I moved back to Boston. I bought a new bike for the first time, a new nice one, a Renfield Volta. When I took it to the shop for its 30-day checkup, it came back in worse shape than when I got there. And that's when I decided I shall learn how to do this myself. And with bicycles being a fair amount less complicated, motorcycles, it was a pretty simple task. And I became a bicycle mechanic in my spare time, like working in shop and everything. And I learned all sorts of esoteric knowledge about bottom bracket dimensions and thread counts and free speed hub dimensions and all sorts of stuff. Still picking around in there somewhere. So I was into bicycles for a long time, and I joined the bicycle chopper gang, built the bicycle chopper, did a lot of bike touring, rode from Boston to Madison, Wisconsin one fall. And then a few years later, and I met my wife, my then wife, in a bike shop. She walked in for a new bike, and she got me instead. We moved to Seattle. I was still into bicycling, but then my heart kind of went funny. I had what's called a mitral valve prolapse, which needed surgery. And so I was kind of off bikes for a while, bicycles. But then after that, about a year later, I got a new job. I had to commute across town, through town. And my wife said to me, you know, you should get another motorcycle. You should do that commute on your bike. And of course, when your now ex-wife tells you to buy a motorcycle, you don't argue. You do what you're told. So I did what I was told. This was back in when was this? Would have been 2018? Yeah, 2018. And I bought a 2010 Kawasaki Versys. So what was I looking for when I bought the thing? Well, I wasn't really thinking in terms of adventure bikes, quote unquote. I was looking for a commuter that offered a bit of wind protection and weather protection, what with us being in the Pacific Northwest. So I was looking at things with fairings, and I was originally thinking something like maybe a 650 Ninja or something like that. What did I test ride? I test rode a Ninja or two, and a V-Strom, which I didn't like. I looked at an SV650, but didn't think it was the right thing because it didn't have a fairing and all. And then I started looking at Versys, because I thought, okay, maybe something that's sort of more upright than the Ninja, better for commuting. And that's sort of how I ended up on a Versys. It wasn't really because I was aspiring to have an adventure bike, which, spoiler alert, a Versys is not an adventure bike. And I wasn't even looking for something that looked like an adventure bike. But let's do today. This is so dangerous. Oh my. Anyway, Versys, yes. So, and like I said, it just exceeded all of my expectations in so many ways. Such a great bike, such a fun bike to ride, great handling, plenty of power on the road for regular road use. Pretty decent weather protection. Of course, that depends on the windshield you have. Pretty simple, super reliable. I would totally have another one. In fact, I've held on to the fancy touring saddle that I had on my last one, with the expectation of maybe buying a newer one that would fit. Jury's still out on that, actually. But jury's still out on that partially because I still have the Versys 1000, just sort of my big, huge touring, mile-eating zoom bike. That's the bike I took on my cross-country trip in the summer of 24. And I did something like, what was it, 8,500, 9,500? Many miles. Many thousands of miles to Maine and back. Portland to Portland, but back again. And this one was sort of my tooling around, going all over the place bike. And I've really enjoyed this bike. I'm not entirely sure what I was expecting from this thing, but it's exceeded my expectations. It's better on the highway than I thought it would be. It's way better on the curves than I thought it would be. It's just like it's like a yes sir kind of a bike. It's like whatever you want it to do, it'll do it. And it's not a tiny bike. I mean, it's a 450, so the engine's not the biggest in the world. In other parts of the world, this would be considered a mid-sized bike. Here, it's considered a small bike in terms of capacity, but physically, dimensionally, it's got a longer wheelbase than the Versus 650. It weighs a bit less. But it's not a small bike, dimensionally anyway. It's a good size, and it fits me well. It's comfortable. And I took this bike to California and back earlier this summer. And it was awesome. It was great. It's like you have to have slightly different expectations about who you can pass and when, or even if. And normally I'm kind of used to passing everyone, especially on the Versus 1000. So can be a nice fast bike. This one, not so much. This one, you might find people even tailgating you. Which is, okay. Slightly different experience than I'm used to, but that's all right. It sort of teaches you a little bit of humility, I think. We could all use a bit more of that. I know everyone else could. So what does all this mean to you? Well, it means nothing to you. But what it means to me is this. I've always thought of bicycles and motorcycles as at least semi-utilitarian objects. And I think in the UK and in other parts of the world, they still think of motorcycles that way. More so than they do here in the States. I think in the States, people really think of motorcycles as recreational instead of utilitarian. But I beg to differ. And that was kind of the way bicycles were when I started getting into bicycles in the early aughts. Bike shops were aspirational. You went there to get a recreational object. You didn't go there necessarily to get a commuting object, at least not most of the stores that I went to. Go ahead. I might have stopped you. So, what I think of bikes as pretty utilitarian. Motorcycles can be very utilitarian. I do most of my errands on the Himalayan, or on the Versus 1000. A lot of my grocery shopping, a lot of my little errands, just zipping around. Sometimes I'll take the car. I'll have the car for kids, carting kids around mostly, and the occasional IKEA run or big where we go grocery run, but wow, any soup today. It's a damn thing. But yeah, motorcycles take less time the engines take less time to warm up and become efficient in the city. They produce fewer emissions even when they're not warmed up, take up less space, they're easier to park, cheaper to insure, they're better on gas, they're more fun, and they're more dangerous. Whee! Well, I picked a hell of a day to do this. Wow. Where was I? Oh yeah, motorcycles are dangerous. Yes, they are. That's true. But so are bicycles and cars and elevators and airplanes, and bridges and lions, and dogs and hay balers and bulldozers and ants, and mosquitoes and tsetse flies. All those things are dangerous. Just walking down the street, you get hit by a meteorite. So, yeah, they're dangerous. But in my mind, the risks kind of outweigh, the benefits outweigh the risks, certainly for my mental health, and my sense of fun and danger. Wow, look at this. This is great. All these wet leaves, all this low visibility. This is wonderful. So, yeah, motorcycles are utilitarian and not at all dangerous, except in the ways that they are dangerous. But there are many ways in which they're not dangerous. I'll get back to you on that. Boy, we're getting full advantage of all the dynamic range on this new camera. Sabatino.